It was a peaceful evening in the small town where Jack lived. The night was quiet, and the only sounds were the occasional chirp of crickets and the gentle rustling of leaves in the trees. Jack sat on the porch, his dog Rex lying beside him. The day had been normal, and he was looking forward to a quiet night. He glanced at the sky, noticing how clear it was, with just a few stars twinkling. Jack stretched, feeling the calmness of the evening wash over him. As the night grew darker, Jack stood up and stretched again, getting ready for bed. "Sleep tight, Rex," he said, scratching the dog's head. Rex, a large, friendly golden retriever, wagged his tail in response. Jack chuckled softly, giving the dog one last pat before heading inside. He closed the door behind him, leaving the cool evening air outside. Inside the house, Jack brushed his teeth and changed into his pajamas. Rex followed him into the bedroom, curling up on his favorite spot at the foot of the bed. Jack yawned, tired from the day's work, and climbed into bed. The soft hum of the house settled into the background as he closed his eyes, drifting toward sleep. Just as he began to relax, the floor under him trembled. It started as a low rumble, almost like a distant thunderstorm. Jack opened his eyes, confused. The shaking grew stronger, and a sudden sharp crack sounded from below. The room shook violently, and Jack jumped out of bed, his heart racing. Rex barked loudly from the corner, clearly frightened by the disturbance. "What's going on?" Jack muttered, grabbing his phone from the nightstand. He saw that the lights were flickering, and the ground seemed to be shaking even more. It wasn't a storm. This was something different. Jack rushed to the window and pulled back the curtains. Outside, the ground was splitting open. At first, Jack thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. The earth in front of his house was cracking open like a giant wound. The ground split wide, revealing an enormous glowing crack beneath the surface. The once still street now looked like something out of a nightmare. His thoughts raced, but before he could process what was happening, a voice echoed through the air, its source impossible to locate. "Take the crown, Emperor." Jack froze. His heart skipped a beat. He looked around the room in disbelief, trying to understand where the voice had come from. It wasn't from the phone or any speaker. It was as if the words came from the very air itself, shaking the ground beneath his feet. "Take the crown, Emperor," the voice repeated, this time louder and more insistent. A chill ran down Jack's spine. What was happening? He glanced at Rex, whose fur stood on end, ears perked, and eyes wide with alertness. The dog growled low, in his throat, staring at the crack in the ground outside. Jack's mind was racing, trying to make sense of the situation. The voice. It was as if it was speaking directly to him, as though it knew who he was. And why Emperor? What did that mean? He shook his head, trying to clear his thoughts. This had to be some kind of strange dream, a trick of his tired mind. But the shaking ground and the voice made it feel all too real. Without thinking, Jack hurried downstairs and out the front door, Rex close behind him. The night air was thick with the smell of dirt and something metallic, as if the very earth itself was alive. He stepped carefully, trying to avoid the cracks that were quickly spreading across his lawn. The ground looked like it was breaking apart, as if something was forcing its way to the surface. The voice continued to echo, growing more powerful. "Take the crown, Emperor." Jack looked down at the large crack that now spanned the entire yard. The earth was glowing with an unnatural light, and in the center of it all he saw something glimmering. It was a dark, ancient-looking structure, half buried beneath the ground. The glow came from something at its center, a throne-like seat that seemed to radiate power. Jack took a step closer, but before he could move further, the ground beneath his feet cracked even more, sending a shock wave through the yard. The force knocked him to the ground. Rex barked in alarm, but Jack scrambled back to his feet. He felt a strange pull toward the glowing throne. It was as if something inside him was urging him to approach, to take control of whatever this was. He walked slowly, hesitantly, toward the throne, his heart pounding in his chest. Every step felt heavier than the last, as if the weight of destiny itself was pressing down on him. Rex stood at his side, watching him with a mix of loyalty and concern. As Jack reached the throne, the voice spoke one final time. "Embrace your destiny, Emperor." A strange, tingling sensation ran through Jack's body as he touched the throne. It felt warm, almost alive. The moment his hand made contact, his mind exploded with visions, alien landscapes, distant stars, vast armies, and a civilization that once spanned galaxies. His head spun, and for a moment, he felt as though he was no longer in control of his own body. "Emperor," the voice whispered one last time, this time almost as a command. Jack pulled his hand away, shaking. His breath was ragged, and his thoughts were a blur. What had just happened? What was this throne? And why had it called him Emperor? Rex whined softly, nudging Jack's leg with his nose. Jack looked down at the dog, whose eyes seemed to hold an unspoken understanding. Jack didn't know what to do next. But one thing was clear. This was only the beginning. Whatever was happening, he was now part of something far bigger than he could ever have imagined. And the voice, whatever it was, had chosen him. Jack stood frozen, staring at the glowing throne in front of him. His mind raced, trying to process what had just happened. The voice that had called him Emperor was still echoing in his ears, but he couldn't make sense of it. His hand tingled from where he had touched the throne, and a strange pull seemed to draw him closer to it, as if it was calling him to sit. Rex, his loyal dog, whined softly beside him, nudging his leg. Jack looked down at Rex, who was gazing up at him with wide, curious eyes. It was as if Rex was waiting for him to make a decision, and Jack wasn't sure what that decision should be. The ground beneath him was still cracked, the glowing light from the deep crevice making everything look surreal. The earth seemed to hum with an energy Jack couldn't understand. He glanced around, expecting someone else to be there, someone who could explain what was happening, but the street was empty. The neighborhood was silent except for the sound of Rex's soft breathing and the distant rumble of the earth shifting. With a deep breath, Jack stepped closer to the throne. His footsteps felt heavy, each one like a decision he couldn't take. Back. When he reached the throne, the air around him grew colder, and the hum of the earth seemed to vibrate through his body. He hesitated, unsure of what to do next. Should he sit? Was this truly meant for him, or was he simply losing his mind? He remembered the voice. "Take the crown, Emperor." The words repeated in his mind like a mantra. The throne seemed to beckon him, its dark surface glimmering with an otherworldly shine. Despite his fear, Jack's curiosity got the better of him, and he reached out again, this time with both hands. The moment his fingers touched the throne, a shock of energy coursed through him. It wasn't painful, but it was overwhelming. Images flashed in his mind. Ancient cities made of stone and metal, vast fleets of ships soaring through space, and strange creatures bowing before him. He saw worlds being destroyed, battles fought across galaxies, and a single figure, the Emperor, standing at the center of it all. Jack felt his heart race, and his head began to spin. The visions seemed to take control of his thoughts, showing him memories that didn't belong to him. He saw himself sitting on this very throne, ruling an empire that spanned the stars. But the images were not peaceful. They were filled with war, destruction, and loss. "Stop," Jack gasped, pulling his hands away from the throne. The vision stopped instantly, and the world around him seemed to snap back to reality. He felt dizzy and disoriented, struggling to catch his breath. Rex was barking now, clearly anxious, but Jack couldn't focus on the dog. His mind was still reeling from the visions he had just experienced. What was all of that? Was it a memory? A warn? Ing? Or something else entirely? Jack looked at the throne again, feeling the pull of its power, but this time it felt different. It wasn't just curiosity anymore, it was something deeper, more urgent. The throne wasn't just a seat. It was something Jack couldn't ignore. It was calling to him, and he didn't understand why. He turned away from it, pacing back and forth in the small area around the crack in the earth. The ground beneath him still hummed with energy, and the eerie light from the deep crevice seemed to grow brighter as the minutes passed. Jack had never felt more alone in his life. He was standing in the middle of his own neighborhood, yet everything around him seemed alien. "Why me?" Jack muttered to himself. "Why did this happen now?" Rex trotted over to him, nudging his leg again, as if trying to comfort him. Jack patted the dog absent-mindedly, still lost in his thoughts. He needed answers, but where could he find them? The voice had called him Emperor, but he didn't know what that meant. How could he possibly live up to something like that? He stood still for a moment, looking up at the sky. The stars were barely visible through the glow from the Earth's crack, but Jack could still see a few. They seemed so far away, as if they had nothing to do with him. Yet the throne below him seemed to suggest otherwise. After what felt like an eternity, Jack took a deep breath and sat down on the edge of the throne, unsure of what to expect. As soon as he sat, a new wave of energy surged through him. His vision blurred for a moment, and when it cleared, he was no longer in his neighborhood. He stood in a massive chamber, its walls made of stone and metal. The air was thick with power, and before him stood beings from across the galaxy. Alien creatures with strange features, some humanoid, some not. They bowed to him. Jack's heart raced again. He was in the same place he had seen in his visions. This was where he had ruled. The throne beneath him felt solid, real. The aliens before him waited for his command, their eyes filled with respect, fear, and admiration. Jack felt the weight of their gazes, and it made him feel small, unsure of what to do. He wasn't ready for this. He wasn't ready to be their Emperor. The silence in the chamber was deafening. Jack wanted to speak, but his mouth felt dry, and his thoughts were too scattered. He wanted to shout, to run, to escape from this place, but his body wouldn't move. He was stuck, trapped in the role that the throne had forced upon him. The throne had been real. The visions had been real. But what did it all mean? Why had this power chosen him? Jack was just an ordinary man, nothing special. But now, he had the knowledge of galaxies, ancient battles, and an empire that spanned across the stars. It was overwhelming. He had no idea how to control it or what to do with it. Jack ran a hand through his hair and glanced down at the throne again. It was just a chair, but it felt like so much more. The throne was not just a seat. It was a symbol of power. But it was also a heavy burden. Jack could feel its weight pressing on his chest, and the voices in his mind urged him to take action. "Take the crown," the voice echoed, again and again, like a drumbeat in his head. But Jack didn't know how. How could he lead something so vast and complicated when he couldn't even understand what was happening? He wasn't a leader, and he certainly wasn't an emperor. He was just Jack, living in a small town with his dog. His eyes drifted to Rex, who had stopped barking and now sat quietly by his side, watching him closely. It was strange, but Jack felt like the dog knew something he didn't. Rex had always been a loyal companion, but now Jack wondered if there was more to him than just being a pet. Had Rex sensed something too? Or was it simply Jack's mind struggling to cope with what had just happened? With a deep breath, Jack turned away from the throne and began to walk back toward the house. The night was still, and the world seemed strangely quiet. The normal sounds of his neighborhood, the rustling of trees, the chirping of crickets, had all disappeared. It was as if the world was holding its breath. Jack opened the door to his house and stepped inside. Rex followed him, his tail wagging, slowly as if reassuring Jack that everything was going to be okay. But Jack wasn't sure about that. He had no answers. All he had was confusion and fear. The power of the throne had been overwhelming, and the visions he had seen felt like a warning. It was as if he was being pushed toward a destiny he couldn't avoid. But Jack didn't want this. He didn't want to be an emperor. He just wanted to live a quiet life. He sat down on the couch and buried his face in his hands. "What is happening? To me?" he whispered, his voice trembling. He felt like he was losing control, like something inside him was changing. Was this the beginning of something greater, or was it all just a terrible mistake? Rex jumped up beside him, nudging Jack's hand with his nose. Jack smiled weakly and patted the dog's head, grateful for the comfort. But even with Rex by his side, Jack felt an emptiness inside, a feeling of dread that he couldn't shake. He wasn't sure what he was supposed to do next. Should he go back to the throne? Should he embrace the power that had chosen him, or should he run from it and try to forget everything that had happened? Before he could answer that question, there was a knock at the door. Jack froze, his heart pounding. Who could it be at this hour? It was late, and the streets outside were eerily silent. Jack didn't want to answer. He didn't want anyone to see him like this, lost and confused. The knock came again, louder this time. Jack stood up and walked toward the door, his footsteps heavy. As he reached for the doorknob, he felt a strange sense of unease, like something was wrong. The air felt thick, and the silence outside was suffocating. He opened the door, and standing on the porch was a figure Jack didn't recognize. The person was tall and wore a dark cloak that covered most of their face, casting them in shadow. But what caught Jack's attention was the strange energy that seemed to surround them. The air crackled with an unspoken power, just like the throne had. Jack could feel it in his bones. "Who are you?" Jack asked, his voice barely a whisper. The figure didn't answer immediately. Instead, they stepped forward, their eyes glowing faintly under the hood of their cloak. Jack instinctively stepped back, but the figure reached out and grabbed his arm with surprising strength. "You are the one," the figure said, their voice low and gravelly. "The one who has been chosen." Jack's heart skipped a beat. Chosen? For what? The figure's grip tightened, and for a moment, Jack felt a rush of cold energy flow through his body. The vision of the throne flashed in his mind again. The power, the empire, the weight of the crown. His head spun, and he gasped for breath. "You must accept your role, Emperor," the figure said, their voice now almost pleading. "The galaxy is waiting for you. The throne is only the beginning." Jack tried to pull away, but the figure's grip was unrelenting. "I'm not ready for this. I don't want this." Jack's voice cracked with desperation. The figure's eyes seemed to glow, brighter, and for a moment Jack saw a flicker of something ancient and powerful in them. "You have no choice, Emperor. The crown has chosen you, and with it, the fate of countless worlds." Before Jack could respond, the figure released him and stepped back. "You will come to understand," they said. "But you must hurry. Time is running out." With that, the figure turned and vanished into the night, leaving Jack standing there, his mind racing. Jack closed the door slowly, his heart still pounding in his chest. What had just happened? Who was that person? And what did they mean by the fate of countless worlds? The weight of the crown felt heavier than ever now. Jack didn't know what to do, but one thing was clear. This was no longer just about him. The universe was pulling him into something far bigger than he could have imagined. Jack stood in the middle of his living room, the air heavy with uncertainty. The figure that had appeared on his doorstep was gone, but the feeling they left behind lingered. He had no idea what had just happened. The world around him felt different, as if it were shifting and changing, pulling him into something he didn't understand. He rubbed his temples, trying to make sense of the night's events. The throne, the voice, the mysterious figure, and the impossible truth that kept echoing in his mind. He was chosen. But for what? He wasn't an emperor. He wasn't anything special. Just a guy with a dog, trying to live a simple life. But now, that life felt far out of reach. Rex, sensing Jack's tension, padded over to him and nudged his hand. Jack looked down at his dog, grateful for the comfort. He knelt down, scratching Rex behind the ears. "I don't know what to do, boy," Jack said quietly, his voice heavy with frustration. Rex wagged his tail as if trying to reassure him, but Jack's mind was a whirlpool of confusion. He stood up, pacing the room. The figure's words kept repeating in his head. "The throne is only the beginning." What did that mean? Jack didn't want to be part of some galaxy-spanning empire. He didn't want to be in charge of anything. All he wanted was to go back to his normal life. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that was no longer possible. The crack in the earth, the glowing throne, and the strange energy had already changed everything. He couldn't ignore it. Something was coming. And it wasn't just about him. The fate of countless worlds was at stake. Jack walked toward the door and opened it, stepping out onto the porch. The night was quiet. Again, the strange hum of the earth now gone, but it felt wrong, like the calm before a storm. He looked up at the sky, the stars barely visible through the lingering glow from the crack in the ground. Was the galaxy really waiting for him? And if it was, what did they want from him? Was he supposed to lead an army? Command a fleet? He looked down at Rex, who was standing at his side. The dog seemed calm, as if he knew something Jack didn't. Maybe Rex had always known. Maybe he was meant to help guide Jack through whatever came next. A sudden noise behind him made Jack jump. He spun around, his heart racing. It was a car, pulling up the driveway. A person stepped out and Jack squinted to see who it was. He didn't recognize the figure, but something about them felt familiar. The person walked toward him and Jack tensed, wondering if this was another stranger with more cryptic messages. The person reached the porch, and Jack noticed they were wearing a dark uniform. They had a commanding presence, their posture straight and confident. They didn't speak at first, just stood there watching him, as if waiting for Jack to say something. Jack opened his mouth to ask who they were, but before he could speak, the stranger raised a hand. "I know you have questions," they said, their voice calm but firm. "But we don't have much time." Jack felt a rush of frustration. "Who are you? What's going on? Why am I being dragged into this?" The stranger didn't seem bothered by Jack's outburst. "My name is Commander Rhea," they said. "I've been sent to help you." Jack stared at the commander, still unsure of what to make of this person. "Help me? How? I don't even know what's happening. One minute I'm living my life and the next—" He gestured toward the glowing crack in the yard. "This happens. People are calling me an emperor and I don't know why, Commander." Rhea's expression softened, just slightly. "You're not alone in this, Jack. The galaxy has been waiting for someone like you. The throne. It's not just a symbol. It's a key. And you are the one who can unlock its power." Jack felt a chill run through him at her words. "What do you mean? Unlock its power? I'm just a guy." Rhea nodded. "That's how it starts. But you're more than you think. The throne calls to those with the right potential. The potential to lead, to bring order to chaos. The galaxy needs someone who can unite the scattered forces of the old empire. Someone with a strong will. Someone who isn't afraid to make tough decisions." Jack shook his head. "I don't want to be some leader. I don't want a war. I just want things to go back to normal." Rhea stepped closer, her gaze intense. "The war is already here, Jack. It's been coming for years, and you've been chosen because you have what it takes to stop it." Stop. It? Jack repeated, his voice growing more desperate. How? I don't know anything about ruling an empire or fighting battles. I'm just a guy who wants to go back to his normal life. Rex, sensing Jack's hesitation, nudged his hand, bringing him back to the present. Jack looked down at his loyal dog, the one constant in his life. Rex was always there, calm and steady, a reminder that some things didn't change. But Jack knew. This situation was bigger than just him and his dog. The galaxy was calling, and he could feel the weight of it pressing on his chest. Jack, you can't avoid this, Commander Rhea said, her voice steady. The throne has chosen you. Whether you want to or not, the responsibility is now yours. You have the power to change the course of this war. Jack clenched his fists, the urge to run rising in his chest. He wanted to leave all of this behind, go somewhere quiet with Rex, and forget about the glowing throne, the voice, and the galaxy, waiting for him. But deep down, Jack knew that wasn't an option. The power in his hands was too great. The choice had already been made. I don't know if I'm ready, Jack muttered. I don't know if I can do this. Rhea's gaze softened. No one is ever truly ready. But you're not alone in this, Jack. The galaxy needs someone who can bring order, someone who isn't afraid to make the tough choices. You've already started, just by standing here. You're stronger than you think. Jack shook his head, still uncertain. What if I fail? What if I make things worse? Rhea took a step forward, placing a hand on Jack's shoulder. You won't fail. Not if you trust yourself. The throne is just a tool. It's your decisions, your actions, that will shape the future. Jack looked at the ground, trying to steady his breath. His mind raced with the possibilities. What if he made the wrong choice? What if he led the galaxy into more destruction? But the throne had chosen him. The voice had called him emperor. He couldn't ignore it, no matter how much he wanted to. His life was never going to be the same again. Okay, Jack said, his voice barely above a whisper. Okay, I'll do it. Rhea's face lit up with a small, approving smile. You've made the right choice. You'll have allies, people who believe in you and will stand by your side. The galaxy isn't as lost as it may seem. Jack felt a weight lifting from his shoulders, but at the same time, a new sense of responsibility settled in its place. He didn't know how to lead, but he had no choice now but to figure it out. And that's what scared him the most. But Rex was still at his side, and somehow, that made him feel a little less alone in the face of everything to come. Rhea turned toward the street, looking out into the night. We'll need to move quickly. The forces that oppose you are already preparing for war. The throne's power is vast, but it's not enough on its own. We need to gather allies. We need to make plans. Jack nodded, taking a deep breath. He could feel the pull of the throne beneath his feet, the power that was still inside him, waiting to be used. What do we do first? He asked. We need to contact the loyal factions, Rhea replied. There are those who still believe in the old empire, those who have been hiding, waiting for a leader to rise. It's time to find them and unite them under your command. Jack hesitated, then looked at Rex, who was still standing quietly beside him. And what about Earth? He asked. What happens to the people here? What if they're caught in the middle of this? Rhea's expression darkened for a moment, but she quickly regained her composure. Earth is important. We will protect it, Jack. But the galaxy is vast, and the dangers here are only a small part of the bigger picture. The sooner we act, the more we can protect. But we will need to be strategic. Jack felt a knot form in his stomach. It was all too much. He didn't know if he was ready to command a galaxy, to be responsible for so many lives. But he also knew that if he didn't step up, the galaxy would continue to fall into chaos. He had to try, for the sake of the people who depended on him, and for Rex, who trusted him without question. We'll start by reaching out to the factions, Jack said, his voice firmer now. "We'll find them and we'll unite them, but I need help. I can't do this alone." Rhea gave him a nod of approval. "You won't be alone, Jack. We'll all be in this together. The throne's power is yours, but it's your heart that will guide you through the darkness." Jack looked up at the night sky, the stars barely visible through the glow from the crack in the ground. The galaxy seemed so far away, yet somehow it was all connected. His future, the future of Earth, and the future of countless worlds now rested in his hands. "Let's do this," Jack said, determination in his voice. Rhea gave a small smile. "It begins now?" Jack's heart raced as he walked down the path leading away from his house, Rex trotting by his side. The weight of his decision hung over him like a thick cloud, but there was no turning back. Commander Rhea had given him a plan, a path to follow. The galaxy was waiting, and he was the one who had to answer the call. It was still hard to believe, but he knew that if he hesitated for too long, the galaxy would slip deeper into chaos. The night air was cool against his skin, and Jack took in a deep breath, trying to calm his nerves. His hands were trembling, but he clenched them into fists, forcing himself to stay focused. He had made a promise to do this, to step up and lead. He wasn't sure how he would succeed, but he had to try. As they reached the car, Rhea gave him a reassuring nod as if sensing his uncertainty. "We'll move quickly, Jack. The sooner we can unite the factions, the better. Time is not on our side." Jack nodded, climbing into the passenger seat. Rex jumped in beside him, lying down on the seat with his head resting on Jack's lap. The dog's presence calmed him more than he expected. Rex had been with him through everything, and now, somehow, it felt like the dog understood the gravity of the situation, too. Rhea started the car, and they drove in silence for a while. The quiet gave Jack a chance to gather his thoughts. There was so much he didn't know about the throne, the galaxy, the war that was coming. He couldn't help but wonder what he had gotten himself into. He was just a regular guy. Was it possible that the fate of the universe really rested on his shoulders? Rhea broke the silence. "The factions we need to contact are spread across the galaxy. Some are far out of reach, hidden away in distant systems. Others are closer, but we need to find them quickly before the Null have a chance to act." "Who are the Null?" Jack asked, his voice shaky. He had heard the name mentioned before, but he still didn't understand what they were or why they were such a threat. "They were once part of the old empire," Rhea explained, her tone grim. "They were exiled long a hat blocks their signals. They've been biding their time, waiting for the right leader to rise, and now they think they've found him." She glanced over at Jack, her eyes hardening. "But they're wrong. They won't get away with it." Jack's heart skipped a beat. Was she talking about him? Was he the leader the Null had been waiting for? The idea seemed insane, but there was no denying the truth. He had been chosen. The throne, the power, everything. He couldn't ignore it anymore. "We'll need to move fast," Rhea continued. "I've already reached out to a few of the factions, but we need to meet them in person. We can't risk trusting any signals or messages. The Null are everywhere, and they'll be watching." Jack didn't respond. He wasn't sure what to say. Everything felt like it was moving so quickly, and he wasn't sure if he was ready for it. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that this was no longer just about him. It was about the future of countless worlds. He couldn't turn away. As they drove, the quiet hum of the engine filled the air, and Jack thought back to the throne, to the visions he had seen. He had seen galaxies fall, worlds burn. He had seen himself, sitting on that throne, making decisions that impacted millions of lives. It wasn't just power he was carrying, it was responsibility, and that responsibility would follow him wherever he went. Rhea glanced at Jack again. "I know this is overwhelming, but you're not alone in this. The factions will stand with you if you show them the way. You have the power to lead them. All you have to do is take it." Jack swallowed hard. I don't know if I can do this. You don't have to do it alone, Rhea replied. You'll have help. You'll have me, and you'll have the loyalty of those who still believe in the old empire. They'll follow you because they know you can do this. You don't need to be perfect, Jack. You just need to be strong. Jack looked out the window, his thoughts swirling. He wasn't sure if he was ready to be strong, but he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't back down. The fate of the galaxy was in his hands. He couldn't run from it anymore. We're almost there, Rhea said, breaking into his thoughts. The first faction is in a remote system not far from here. They've been waiting for us. Jack nodded, trying to steady his nerves. His hands were still shaking, but he clenched them into fists again, determined not to show fear. Rex looked up at him, his eyes full of trust, and Jack felt a small sense of calm wash over him. If nothing else, he wasn't alone in this. Rex was with him, and that was enough to give him some strength. The road stretched ahead, winding through the dark landscape, lit only by the soft glow from the dashboard. Jack sat in the passenger seat, his hands resting on his knees, his mind far from calm. He looked out the window, trying to push away the unease that gripped him. Every mile they drove took him deeper into a world he hadn't asked for, a world that had chosen him, whether he was ready or not. The throne, the power, the galaxy, it all felt like too much for one man to carry. Rex, as always, sat beside him, his presence a quiet comfort. Jack reached down and patted the dog's head. I wish I could just go back to normal, he muttered, almost to himself. Rex nudged him in response, as though trying to reassure him. Jack smiled weakly. He knew that no matter what happened, next, Rex would be there. But that wasn't enough to ease his doubts. The decisions ahead of him were enormous. Lives depended on him, and Jack wasn't sure he was the right person to make those choices. Commander Rhea's voice broke through. His thoughts. We're almost there. The faction leaders are expecting us. Jack nodded without looking at her. What exactly am I supposed to say to them? I mean, how do I convince them to follow me? I don't even know what I'm doing. Rhea's gaze remained steady on the road ahead. You don't need to have all the answers right now, Jack. Just be honest with them. Show them that you can be the leader they've been waiting for. Show them that you're ready to fight for the galaxy. Jack swallowed hard. But what if I fail? What if I'm not strong enough? You'll find your strength when you need it, Rhea said, her tone firm yet kind. You have more inside you than you realize. The galaxy isn't looking for perfection. They're looking for someone who will stand up, someone who will lead them through this. Jack wasn't sure he believed her, but he appreciated her words. It didn't make him feel any less scared, but it gave him something to hold on to. They were heading toward the first faction, a group of rebels who still believed in the old empire. They had been hiding, waiting for a leader, for someone to rise and bring them together. Jack had no idea how they would react when they saw him, but he knew it had to be him. The throne had chosen him, and now there was no turning back. The car slowed as they approached a small, fortified compound. It was nothing like the cities Jack had seen in his life, just a few scattered buildings surrounded by high walls. The guards at the entrance saw them coming and signaled for them to stop. Jack's heart pounded in his chest as Rhea pulled up to the gate. This was it, the moment that would set everything in motion. Rhea spoke briefly with the guards, and then they were led inside. Jack's footsteps felt heavy as he followed Rhea into the heart of the compound. The people here were unlike any he had ever seen. They were tough, battle-worn, with eyes that had seen too much. Jack felt out of place among them, unsure of how they would treat him. He was no general, no military leader. He was just a man who had been pulled into this world by a throne he didn't understand. They entered a large meeting room where several leaders were gathered. They looked up when Jack and Rhea walked in, their expressions unreadable. Jack felt the weight of their gaze on him, the pressure of their expectations pressing down on him. He swallowed, trying to steady his nerves. Rex stayed close by his side, his presence oddly reassuring. "Everyone, this is Jack," Rhea said, her voice calm. "He is the one who will lead us." The leaders exchanged looks, their faces hard to read. One man, taller than the rest, stepped forward. "I've heard the rumors," he said, his voice low and cautious. "You're the one the throne chose, but that doesn't mean you've earned our trust." Jack's heart raced. This was the moment. He had to make them see that he was worthy of their trust, even if he wasn't sure of it himself. He took a deep breath and stepped forward. "I'm not asking for your trust," he began, his voice steady but unsure. "I'm not asking you to follow me just because the throne chose me. I'm asking you to follow me because I want to help us all survive. The galaxy is falling apart, and if we don't stand together, we won't make it through this." Falio, man who had spoken first, regarded him for a moment, his eyes searching. Jack could feel the tension in the room, the weight of their expectations. "And what makes you think you're the one who can lead us?" the man asked. Jack thought about all the visions he had seen, the galaxies, the battles, the throne. He thought about the weight of the crown, the responsibility that came with it. But more than that, he thought about Earth, about Rex, about the life he had once known. He had never wanted any of this, but now that it was in his hands, he couldn't walk away. "I don't know if I'm the right one," Jack said, his voice quiet but firm. "But I'm the one who's here. And I'm not going to let us fall apart. I'll do whatever it takes to bring us together, to fight for what's left of this galaxy, but I need your help. All of you." There was a long silence as the leaders exchanged looks again. Jack held his breath, waiting for them to decide his fate. Finally, the man who had spoken earlier nodded. "All right," he said, his voice calm but resolute. "We'll follow you, but you'd better be ready to lead us. The road ahead is going to be a tough one." Jack's heart lifted slightly, but the weight of the decision still hung heavy. This was just the beginning. There were more factions to unite, more challenges to face. But for the first time since he had touched the throne, Jack felt like he might be ready for it. He turned to Rex, who was sitting at his feet, looking up at him with calm, trusting eyes. Jack smiled and whispered, "We can do this, boy. We have to." As they prepared to leave the compound, Jack felt a sense of purpose settling in his chest. He didn't know what the future held, but he was ready to fight for it. The galaxy had chosen him, and now he was ready to embrace his destiny.